I'll just play the intro that I had in mind for you. It's about Keir Starmer, Labour government, and their first week in office. If you want to look away, then please do.
I invite you all to join this government of service in the mission of national renewal. Our work is urgent, and we begin it today. I have, as you'll have seen, appointed a cabinet. I shall set off tomorrow to be in all 4 nations, to Scotland, to Northern Ireland, to Wales, and then back to England. I shall hold a meeting of the Metro Mayors to discuss with them their part in delivering the growth that we need across the United Kingdom.
Our economy has been held back by decisions deferred and decisions ducked. This government will be different.
I'm not prepared to continue with gimmicks that don't act as a deterrent.
As of today, we are ending the absurd ban on new onshore wind in England.
We are today launching the Border Security Command process to make sure that we can get the new commander and new cross-border police in place.
We are going to get Britain building again. We are going to get Britain's economy growing again, and there is no time to waste.
I shall set off to Washington for the NATO summit. This NATO summit is an opportunity for allies to stand together. The first duty of my government is security and defence. The change of government makes no difference to the support that we will provide. The work has started, and we will deliver change as quickly as we can. Self-interest is yesterday's politics. I want a politics and a country that works for you.
Well, there you go, Prem. It's all been done in the first week. He's done all that. He's gone around the world and he's come back and he's sorted everything out. What's your take on the first week and what the Labour government have announced and done?
Well, to some extent, it's early days, but there are some early impressions at the same time. First of all, we got pantomime politics. It's always the fault of the previous government. Tories did that for 14 years, said Liam Byrne had left them a note saying there was no money left, and that kind of obfuscated what they were doing. It's very well blaming the previous governments, but that won't really do. Governments are elected to address problems, not to perpetuate them. This pantomime approach to politics won't lift people out of poverty, won't increase real wages, benefit pensions, won't end corporate profiteering, won't redistribute income and wealth. And I haven't really seen any start on that. So we really need to forget this kind of pantomime, which is being enacted and continues to be enacted. The other interesting thing to note is how Labour is obfuscating issues by committees and creating inquiries, just as previous governments have done. For example, Rachel Reeves has instructed Treasury officials to conduct an urgent review of the state of national finances. It begs the question, don't these officials already know what the state of the nation's finances is? What about OBR? It's been publishing forecasts 5 years ahead, and Labour has said it would enhance its role. Has that statement been really made without knowing what is going on with the nation's finances? If the nation's finances are not in good shape, what exactly has Labour been working on for the last 5 years when in opposition? So again, there is an issue. The Education Secretary is considering an investigation of the physical condition of the school's estate. I can point out, anybody here can point out, the dire state of the schools. And again, don't really the officials know what has been going on and what exactly has the shadow cabinet been doing? And the other trick which we note is the trick of appointing the right people to get the answers which the ministers want. On 11th July, Health Secretary Wes Streeting ordered an inquiry into the state of the NHS. And this inquiry is headed by Professor Lord Darcy, who's in the House of Lords. Lord Darcy previously was an advisor and a junior minister, I think, in Gordon Brown's administration, and he has already published a number of reviews. And the latest inquiry ordered by Streeting is unlikely to cover anything new. And what exactly will Darcy recommend? So here is a snippet from his report on healthcare for London. And I quote, "The NHS should be committed to working in partnership with other organisations, including local government, the voluntary and private sectors." So we can see what is going to come our way from that review. This is really a cue for Streeting to reward his financial backers, who masquerade as donors, for bigger share of the NHS, which will increasingly become a shell doling out contracts. And we've already seen a lot of cataract operations are being done in the private sector at almost double the cost of what it costs the NHS. Hip replacements, knee joint replacements are being carried out in the private sector, which means the public sector is losing the capacity to train people. And of course, if there are any problems in the private sector, a friend of mine recently went for knee replacement, came back with a leg full of infections, and that had to be treated at the NHS because private sector does not deal with those things at all. So we can expect a bigger role for the private sector in the NHS. 30 to 40% of the money handed to private sector disappears in profits. So more money will actually buy less. And sooner or later, they will be telling us, well, people got to pay for seeing the GPs, or people got to pay for going to A&E and something like that. So that doesn't really help. The biggest problem with the NHS is that the drug companies are siphoning off a lot of money through excessive profits. That is why the 2019 manifesto said government should undertake a manufacture of generic drugs, so that you reduce the money which is leaking out. And that again is not really on the table at all. So those are two things I identified so far. The third thing, crony capitalism is kicking and alive. Just one example, big accounting firms, and I've commented on their trade of delivering dud audits and tax dodges all over the world. They have been advising Labour in opposition. They provided free staff, and now they have been rewarded. For example, Jackie Smith, former minister, acting as a KPMG consultant, has now got a ministerial job. Alan Milburn has now been a PricewaterhouseCoopers consultant. He has now got a ministerial job. Former Deloitte partner, a tax partner, Bill Dodwell, is now advising Reeves on tax dodges. Interestingly, the firm has a huge reputation for devising tax dodges. So what this kind of crony capitalism means, we can expect little reform of accounting, auditing, corporate governance, or tax abuses. So Labour manifesto said it would tax the income of private equity managers as income rather than capital gains. But that has already now been diluted, because Reeves has said that managers who provide their own capital will be taxed on their income at the capital gains rates, which are between 10% and 28%, rather than as wages and salaries, which is taxed at the rate of 20% to 45%. So accountants, lawyers will now have a field day devising schemes to show that these managers are providing their own capital, thereby escape a full tax charge. And the last item, as sociologists joining us would tell us that there is always continuity and change. So Labour's slogan was change, but what I notice here is continuity. So lots of new peers are being parachuted into the House of Lords. I can't wait for the day I can vote for abolition of the Lords and its replacement by an elected chamber accountable to the people at large. and I will raise that point in the Lords as soon as I can. Uh, Publicly, Labour has said it can't commit to uncosted financial spending commitments. But what has Starmer done? Immediately committed to increase spending on armaments or military spending, immediately committed to handing £3 billion pounds more to Ukraine, immediately allowed water companies to hike bills by 21% on average, in some areas by 44%, while making noises that we will hold managers accountable. And at the same time, Labour is opposed to removing the two-child benefit cap. So I notice continuity, but very little change here. And I'm afraid some of us will oppose it in Parliament, though Labour has a huge majority in the Commons, which means they will get their way, but they should not really get their way. Parties should not be imposing the whip on these debates. So one of the consequences of imposing the whip and censoring MPs has been that thousands of people, or maybe hundreds, or maybe even well over 1,000 people, have ended up with indefinite prison sentences. Because in the Blair government, under David Blunkett, that is what they created. People could be given indefinite prison sentences. Some people have spent 12 years in prison for stealing a mobile phone, and they're still suffering. And anybody who opposes it immediately gets a letter from the whip. You're not following the party line. You're under threat. And I think really there is that kind of an issue again. We need to debate the issues, and I will speak up for what I think I need to speak up about. So they're the kind of things I have noticed in the first week. I'm sure I missed many, but I'll no doubt return to that at a future date.